The radio. In a world dominated by Wi-Fi and fiber optics, the radio is often overlooked. Before the 1900s, communication was very hard. People had to travel far distances just to transfer information. However, in the mid-1890s, an Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi changed everything. Marconi was born in Bologna, Italy, on April 25, 1874. He was educated in physics at the technical school in Leghorn. Marconi soon became interested in the works of Heinrich Hertz, who first discovered Hertzian waves in 1894. Before inventing the radio, Marconi was also able to send Morse code through the air over a modest distance in Italy. When scientists started contributing more to the radio, four chief players were ahead. But before the radio was even an idea, electromagnetic waves had to be discovered. In the year 1885, Heinrich Rudolf Hertz uncovered electromagnetic waves. Soon following was the discovery of electromagnetic radiation by James Clerk Maxwell. Other experimenters, such as Oliver Lodge and Jagadish Chandra Bose, explored the physical properties of electromagnetic waves, and they developed electric devices and methods to improve the transmission and detection of electromagnetic waves. However, they did not see the communication potential of electromagnetic waves. But Marconi was able to dominate America's radio because he grasped and exploited the independence among technology, focused on business strategy, and worked with the press. Because of all of this, he was able to invent and be credited with the invention of the radio. Radios consist of an antenna, printed circuit board, resistors, capacitors, coils and transformers, transistors, integrated circuits, and a speaker. All of these parts are housed in a plastic case. Depending on the size or type of radio, some would have more or less circuit boards than others. Although there are a variety of radios such as car, ham, and stereo, they all contain the same basic components as each other. Radios also have different modes. The most common ones are AM, amplitude modulation, and FM, frequency modulation. Other modes used are CW, continuous wave using Morse code, SSB, single sideband, digital modes such as telemetry, radio teletype, and PSK, phase shift keying. All of these are used to make it more secure or encrypted. Originally, AM radio was the main broadcasting format for all radios. It wasn't until the invention of the FM broadcasting method when the radio's usefulness took off. Instead of varying the amplitude or power of radio waves to carry voice or music, as in all radio before then, FM radio varied or modulated the wave's frequency over a wide band of frequencies. This made it possible to have high-fidelity broadcasting in longer ranges. The person who came up with FM radio was Edwin H. Armstrong. After securing 4 patents and $300,000, he set out to build the first full-system FM radio by himself in 1939. Before the radio, telegraphs were the main way of communicating. So what really was a telegraph? The telegraph was invented in the 1830s by Samuel Morse and other inventors. Marconi was able to add on to the existing invention many years later and create something new. Telegraphs transmitted signals between wires connected by 2 stations and were used to carry hidden messages, often disguised in Morse code. After various tests and changes, Morse was able to send his first telegraphic message from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. From that point on, an era of communication began. Communication has always been an important part of daily life, with people trying to communicate with others. After the radio was invented, people relied on it for many situations. For example, people trusted radio systems to keep ships safe at sea since there wasn't any other way to warn of immediate danger. The consequences of communication failure could be very minor to a huge catastrophe. One that we can all remember is the Titanic. The Titanic is one of many examples that communication has a part in humanity. During this event, a message was sent by a Marconi radio operator in the Titanic 30 minutes after striking the iceberg. It was then followed by various other messages in which radio operators on land failed to understand it and ended up spreading false information to the general public. This resulted in many casualties before the radio operators realized what had happened. From this event, people realized that though the breakthrough of the radio was powerful and important, they couldn't rely on non-licensed operators to control the radios. This sparked the Radio Act of 1912, which required all radio operators to be federally licensed and all ships to maintain constant radio alert for distress signals. We still see these changes today as cruise ships or Navy ships sail out to sea using radars or walkie-talkies to communicate. Another example of miscommunication was the Great Radio Scare in 1938. Orson Welles wasn't intending to go down in history, but the event that day showed how impactful the radio could be. Orson was reading his science fiction story about a Martian invasion and had realistic sound effects that tricked a lot of people. It wasn't until the end of it that people realized what was going on. Although everything seemed to be evolving around the world with all kinds of new inventions and innovation, another important event collided with the world: the Great Depression. The Great Depression began in 1929, sparking from the fiery pit that the stock market had fallen into. About 15 million people were forced into unemployment during a time span of about 43 months. Life became harder and harder for people to live through. This caused depression to flood over people's thoughts. This event took place soon after the invention of Marconi's radio. We already know that this radio had many uses, but throughout this era we saw that its uses weren't just for ships at sea. Lots of people had to distract themselves from the hardships of the Great Depression, and one way to do that at the time was to tune in at a local radio station. These radios attracted all kinds of people who would travel miles to come and communicate with one another. But the radio didn't just give insurance to people during this time. It also was a major player in an event that healed the nation itself. As the Great Depression continued on, Germany suddenly seized the attention of the world. This was due to their invasion of Poland in 1939, resulting in France and Britain declaring war on them that same year. The United States believed that they had no reason to get involved and thought of the issue as a dispute between foreign nations, but after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the US took things personally. As time went on, Germany began to lose leverage over the Allies, and their leader, whose name was Adolf Hitler, committed suicide, throwing things into a situation resulting in the downfall of Germany. The war pushed all kinds of people to stand up and leave their depression behind to fight for justice. The war mobilized the economy and the people for war, and unity was found again. Many people went to good-paying army defense jobs and led to the end of the Great Depression. This showed not only the importance of the war on the Great Depression, but can also relate back to the radio. The radio was a powerful weapon in the war. It was used to communicate and organize attacks and defenses, and could also be used to send secret coded messages to allies. After World War II, the Allied forces started encouraging more regional and cultural news to be told by the radio, while Germany and Japan were also trying to remove centralized and nationalistic radio by adding more radio transmitter for local broadcasting. After the war, many countries had to start over with their radio industry because of the aftermath. Poland, the Soviet Union, and Greece had to rebuild their entire radio system from scratch, which quintupled Europe's total radio transmitters. Other experiments with the radio were funded until money ran out. UNESCO and the World Bank were the primary supporters of such experiments, as the radio was seen as the most useful mass medium in places where literacy levels were low, and television or newer media were much more expensive to buy and maintain. As the world started to go back to normal, podcasts and news shows became more popular. Programs like BBC, British Broadcasting Company, and VOA, Voice of America, were very important for spreading daily news to people. With more and more people starting to use radios, music once again became one of the most broadcasted programs. Music helped raise people's spirits and were also careers for others. Culturally, music evolved a lot from the 1900s to the 2000s, from rock and roll to boy bands to divas and pop music. Music has played an influential part in our lives. On August 20th, we have a National Radio Day. On this day, UNESCO calls on radio stations to celebrate this event's 10th anniversary and the more than 110 years of radio through three sub-themes: evolution, how the world changed, how the radio was improved, how the radio is still sustainable; innovation, how the radio adapts to the world changing; and connection, how the radio connected society through rough times and natural disasters. Many inventions were developed off the inspiration of the radio. Devices like smartphones, computers, and wireless earphones are all modern-day examples of inventions that wouldn't exist without Marconi's breakthrough in the development of the radio. These inventions are used billions of times a day for all different sorts of communication, showing how much our world relies on and needs communication.